Hey everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys and gals about how really old school bodybuilders used to approach their bench press angles and their training. And what's interesting, I've seen certain historians mention this, and I've even heard Louis Simmons mention this. And the funny thing is, I remember reading about this in some much older books, well over 20 years ago. And then later, gosh, I think about 9 or 10 years ago, I heard Louis Simmons, the strength coach from Westside Barbell, discuss, well, old school bodybuilders used to do this. And, he's mentioned it's an approach people can take. And mainly what we're talking about is that approach is for the bench presses, because it really lets you get strong out of the bottom of the bench, right? So people who tend to train that way, they don't tend to miss bench presses right off the chest. So what was it that he mentioned? Okay. Well, it's that they used to split their three angles up about evenly. So out of their training every week, he's like, old school bodybuilders would do about a third of their pressing training on a flat bench, about a third of it on an incline, and about a third of it is overhead. Okay? And that's kind of an interesting perspective. Now, a lot of people are going to say, isn't that going to be really front delt heavy? Yeah, it actually will be, because the front delts are getting a little more work in the chest. Because all the exercises hit it, but it's also really still going to work extremely well for the chest, particularly when you consider that all those old school guys do what I'm doing in these videos. Notice how wide I'm gripping all the chest presses. So looks like I'm almost to the J hooks, because I am almost at the J hooks. I am doing all the chest presses. Now, the overhead, I don't, because it doesn't feel the same on my shoulders, doesn't feel right. I like to do it a little closer. But as far as the flat bench and the incline, these days you guys see me pretty much doing a really wide grip. So to put it into context, my pointer finger is on the rings on those, right? It's on the actual rings on the bar. And those rings are on a bar in inches is 32 inches apart on a standard bar. Like that is the standard spacing for power bars because of bench press competitions, right? That's where they're set, and you can't be outside of those, meaning those rings have to be covered by at least one of your fingers in terms of how wide you can go on the grip, okay? So by doing that, what do we get? We get some phenomenal chest development, okay? And we get really strong out of the bottom of the bench because we're used to putting a deep stretch on the pecs. Used to getting a really deep stretch on the pecs. Now you get a lot of guys, well, it hurts my shoulders. Why do you think it hurts your shoulders? Could it be because you have weak delts and weak rear delts and all the other stabilizers? Okay, that's a factor. Could be the fact you might be bouncing the bar off your chest instead of controlling it. Those are factors. But that really wide grip is how they used to train. And notice the difference. Notice how many guys today struggle with chest. How many guys do you see out there today in the more modern world who say things like, the bench press doesn't work my chest that well? That's a modern problem. Nobody had that problem back in the day, did they? So what do you mean? Most of the guys used it as a primary exercise, and they all had big pecs. They had well-developed pecs. Why? Because they did all their benching really wide. They made sure that the chest was the primary mover. They made sure the chest got stretched at the bottom. Now that's the other thing. Maybe you're not used to that stretch, and your shoulders might be hurting because of that also. Not only have you got some weaknesses, you're not used to being put into a stretch position. And so therefore you're interpreting it as shoulder pain because you're not used to being at those angles. It's so disadvantaged if you're not used to it. But it really gives you one heck of a stretch and burn and pump in your pecs, okay? It will light your pecs up. Notice I do the same thing on that incline bench. When I do the inclines, what do you see me doing? I'm gripping way out there. All right, the other thing, just like a lot of the old school guys did, notice I don't have an arch. People will say, well, really wide can shorten the range of motion, but look how long my range of motion is. I'm not arching. I'm laying there pretty much flat back while keeping tight, but I'm flat back in that regard. Now, there's a natural arch in your spine, but I'm not creating any additional beyond that. Okay, I'm not up here attempting to arch like you would do to cut range of motion for powerlifting. So what does that also mean? Not cutting range of motion out of the bottom, so the pecs are getting stretched. Okay? Pecs are getting stretched. Now notice that grip width on the incline, the same thing. Going super wide. All right, make sure the pecs get stretched. All right, now what's one of the other perks here with the incline? I'm talking about building a bigger bench. Incline will fix it. If you missed a few inches off your chest, the incline will help fix that. Why? Because that's how the bar transitions. It transitions towards your face into a slight incline angle at that transition point. If you're not strong enough to push through it, it's a problem. The incline bench will build the muscles to help you push through that, the upper chest, front delts. Okay? Helps with all that. So then what about the overhead press? Well, the overhead press comes in and really hammers those front delts, and to some extent the side delts. Hammers those front delts even more. Builds your shoulders up. Okay. So what we're doing there is that will increase your incline. So doing that bit of overhead pressing thrown in also will double down on that front delt work. It will make your incline stronger because it will build some of the muscles involved with some of the potential weak points of the incline. And then if your incline gets stronger, it helps you get a deeper stretch on your chest, build those other muscles that help with that sticking point. Do you see where I'm going with all this? All those guys had really strong front delts and they had really thick pecs that were used to being stretched out of the bottom because of that wide grip. So people who train that way, when they really want to put big numbers up on the raw bench, they're capable of doing it. Particularly if you're a raw lifter because you have so much power out of the bottom. All right, so we need to be clear on that. The incline and the overhead press will give you more power just off the chest. That's where you miss. But the other thing, it ensures balanced pec development. You're going to have a much more aesthetic chest training this way. Why? The really wide grip is going to build the whole chest. The incline is going to make sure that upper chest gets hit along with the front delts and those tie-ins, and then the overhead press will shore that up even more, especially the front delts. So doing this sort of approach that you see me doing here, if your goal is to really build up a nice solid chest, but with really thick upper chest development and really good tie-ins between where the front delts meet the whole upper chest, to that whole region, training like this is actually a very, very beneficial way to go. And those old school guys figured this out back before guys were running a ton of gear. And it worked very well for them. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.